Hello everyone and welcome to this new video that's based around developing an academic writing style. Now this is something that's a little bit different to what we've done in many of our previous videos in that it's not really based around content, it's based around shaping that content and making sure that it looks really sophisticated on the page. Now the tips that are in this video come from looking at what I've seen in students' work across our different schools. The sort of things which are working well, the sort of things where people could improve the quality, the shape, the direction, the style of their writing. And it's got some general guidance with some practical examples for you to take away and apply it to your own work. So yeah, let's crack straight on. A few guiding points at the start, as you can see I've got on the screen here. It's not just about what you write. Your mark in a literature essay is not just dependent upon the content of it. Content and the way that it's written are interconnected just in the same as they are in language. And so the highest grades of answer require you to express your thoughts in a sophisticated way, because the way that you express them is linked to the quality of the thoughts themselves. You can't express a really complex and sophisticated idea in a simple way. It's just it's impossible. So it's about how you write, and therefore students getting high marks in English, English essays don't tend to use simplistic sentence openings. Now that's not to say that you need to pack your essay full of vocabulary and convoluted sentence starters and fronting adverbs and stuff like that to try and make it sound really fancy. You don't. What it is, it's about putting certain things in the content in the right place and fronting them so that you are focusing on the issue rather than focusing on your words. It's not about your words, it's about how your words express the content of what you're saying. And so there are several simple steps that we are going to go through in order to do that. So first of all, let's look at the difference between a weaker writing style and a more academic one. And this is where I'm going to use my my little pad here. So we have got the same paragraph, which is expressed in two different ways, and I've highlighted three differences between. So we're going to focus on what they do and how they influence the quality of this writing, because the content is virtually identical. Scrooge hears the ghost of Christmas past use his own words against him. I've missed a word out there, I just noticed. From stave one against him, sorry, it's fine. Where he shows his lack of empathy towards the poor. Okay, so we've got a fairly decent idea in this first sentence. Now, if you are showing a lack of empathy towards the poor, so that's what this sentence kind of builds towards, you then have to develop that in your next sentence, because otherwise, there's no connection between the two. You can't end a sentence talking about lack of empathy, no feelings, poor people, poverty, and then go on to talking about something else completely different in the next sentence. So in this one here, it says, this shows. Now the problem with this, and I mean the word this there, is when you say the word this, you're just pointing generally back towards that. So do you mean the poor? Do you mean the lack of empathy? Do you mean lack of empathy towards the poor? Do you mean Scrooge's own words? It's a little bit vague. Okay. If we are vague in what we are saying, the next point is also going to be hindered by that, because it's not clear about what shows this and why that's relevant to what we've just said. So when it actually goes on to it, he must change his attitude towards those who are less fortunate. Well, that's the more important bit of that sentence. And that is what connects to the previous bit that I've underlined in red. The this shows isn't really important in that sentence. That is. So what we need to do is we need to bring the thing which is important towards the front of the sentence, because that's where we're showing our knowledge. Similar sort of thing here. We can see that. Well, for a start, who is we? Who is that? I'm just going to put on there, because that's also... And again, it's a lack of clarity. Who can see this? Why can we see this? And what does it go on to say? We can see that feelings of compassion have begun to ignite inside of him. Right. Well, that's the important bit again. So try and front the important bit to the beginning of the sentence. He no longer cares just for himself. That's also a good thing. I think that readers need to undergo a similar change. Right. Academic writing doesn't tend to write in the first person. We want to avoid that. Okay? I think that readers need to undergo a similar change and feel a sense of revulsion at the conditions the poor are exposed to and do something about it. Well, these are really nice ideas. And again, they should be the things which are focused on, not the I. It's not about us in an essay, it's about the content. And so therefore, that's what should be important. So this is kind of putting the wrong things first in the sentence. And by using these weaker sentence openings, it's not about the word, it's about where the focus is in the sentence. A better version is this. Scrooge hears the ghost of Christmas past use his own words against him from Save One Against Him, where he shows his lack of empathy towards the poor. I do need to change that one. It is at this point he begins to realise he must change his attitudes towards those who are less fortunate. So here, it is at this point we are being very precise. Precision is a mark of a good essay. We are precise because it's at this point, at the end of stage 1, which we are talking about, and that's where that lack of empathy comes from. Feelings of compassion have begun to ignite inside him. So if you compare this one back to what I had up here in the first one, I put that feelings of compassion towards the front of the sentence. So put the important bit first. Have begun to ignite inside of him, and he no longer just cares for himself. Dickens wants his readers to undergo a similar change and feel a sense of revulsion at the conditions the poor are exposed to and to do something about it. So again, here we focus on the writer, because it's not us that's important. We're the reader. You know, there's a book's had, countless readers. It's about what that book is trying to tell us. So focus on writer and their craft. Okay? That is why that paragraph is going to get a much better mark than that first one. Even though the content is very, very similar, because it's sewn together in a much more straightforward way. Okay, apologies on the wording of the first sentence there. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the things to avoid. We want to avoid making the subject of the sentence unclear, such as using this. We don't want to do that. Avoid the first person, I think, we can see it, etc. It's not about our thoughts, it's about looking at it from an impersonal perspective, looking at what the writer's trying to say, and looking at what the characters are doing and saying and why. Okay, so we don't want to do first person. Avoid the second person, you can see. You never talk to your audience in an academic essay. Don't want to do that at all. And then here's some just common stock phrases to avoid. The word this is really, really bad in an essay, so avoid this shows, avoid this suggests, avoid this means, and similar sort of thing with it. Because again, it is very imprecise. What? If you're saying the word it, you may as well just say the thing which the it is referring to, because it's a pronoun. Okay? So avoid all of these in your writing. Now, things that we should do instead, that second one did better, if we can just change to green here. When you put the important thing in the sentence at the beginning, it focuses the reader of your essay onto the thing which you are trying to show knowledge about. So instead of talking about this shows or this idea or I think, put the thing there. And that's often going to be as a phrase. Okay? So put a phrase as a sentence subject. So the phrase here, instead of saying Scrooge feels something or I think or we can see that Scrooge, put the thing first. So feelings of compassion. That is a phrase which focuses on Scrooge. Scrooge's redemption. Okay? A phrase here that is going to be useful when talking about later staves in A Christmas Carol. The poverty of the Cratchit family. So again, not just saying the Cratchit family, but the poverty of the Cratchit family. It's a more precise phrase to deal with. Rather than saying, I think poverty is a significant issue, saying the poverty of the Cratchit family is much more sophisticated. Second one, phrases describing specific change. So when you need, this is almost like cause and effect. One thing happens and then another thing kind of follows on from it. As a result of being shown such horrendous poverty, Scrooge realises something. So you've got two halves here. So poverty leads to something else. By this point in the novel, Scrooge's selfishness has become, and you see a change because of that point in the novel. Next one. Focus on the writer's intention. This is really easy. Dickens' message. We often do this in the development of our comment and evidence, as we often talk about in lessons. Now, here's a little tip for you. When you know that someone doesn't like something, so we know that Dickens doesn't like poverty, use a word which expresses that dislike. Dickens' frustration or Dickens' anger. Show their opinion. Really useful thing to do. Okay? At the bottom, time phrases. A story is about a chronology, a structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the whole point of any of the books that we look at, whether it's Christmas Carol, Inspector Calls, Blood Brothers, Jekyll and Hyde, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, whatever it is, it's about change. All of these stories are about change, either lots of change or a lack of change. You know, whether people change in a good way, people change in a bad way. So describing that process is really important. So therefore, time phrases are going to be useful. Okay, any form of these adverbials here. So shortly after this, okay, now this is okay here because you're using it in respect of something else. Or shortly after Scrooge sees ignorance and want, for example, you could be more specific there. As a result, or you could say, as a result of realizing people don't care about him, Scrooge, or by the end of the novel, Scrooge has become. So these very precisely show a cause and effect. I'm just going to put that down there because that's kind of a clearer way of putting it. I think. So when one thing happens, what follows as a result? All right. Now, I just want to give a couple of practical examples for that first one. So here's on the left-hand side where you would do it in a slightly more simplistic way. So instead of saying he feels compassion, you could say Scrooge's compassion has been rediscovered. So words like this, fronting that phrase at the beginning, is a more sophisticated way of doing that. Feelings of compassion, again, more sophisticated way. Scrooge's sense of compassion, a little bit longer this time. All of these are better forms of that. Instead of saying he has been redeemed, focus on the idea of redemption and bring that to the front. So in this, Scrooge's redemption has now, the completion of Scrooge's redemption, if talking about stage 5, the final act of Scrooge's redemption was to become a second father to Tiny Tim. That's the sort of thing you would say there. So there's a practical example of how that could work. There's some more suggestions at the top, the poverty of the Cratchit family. It's about bringing the important thing to the front of the sentence, and that's going to make your writing better. Okay? Now we're going to go on to trying to put this into practice. Now before you do this, you might want to sort of pause the video and go back to the suggestions that I had on previously. There are them again. So pause the video if you want to make a few notes, or you want to make a few examples, so you can see them, and then we'll go back. I want you to put into action what I've tried to teach you in this video. So we're going to focus on stage 5 at the end of the novel here, as I've just put. So focus on stage 5. So it's going to be about change. It's going to be about redemption, etc. So Scrooge has changed. Here are some statements on the right-hand side that I'd like you to put into practice, adapting to make them more sophisticated. And you're going to use the principles I've explained in this video. Now, you do not have to write them all as separate sentences. You can combine some of them together. You can make some of them sub-clauses, some of them main clauses. You can make some cause, some effect, etc. But here's your content. The reason why I've given you all these statements is because I don't want you focusing on the content. I want you focusing on the purpose of this video, which is trying to knit this content together in a sophisticated way. So these things on the right hand side, if you write them in an appropriate way, would get you a grade 9 comfortably. For this part of your essay. So the content here is not in question. It's the way that we put it together. We don't just want to say Scrooge did this, Scrooge did this, the quote is this, Dickens does this. We want to practice all of those things which I have said there. Okay. So now you want to pause the video and have a go at writing this using those examples that you've previously been taught in this video. Okay. So if you have now done that and you've unpaused your video, here's an example answer of what it could look like. Obviously, I've not used everything that's in that section because it would be really, really long. But let's have a look at some of the things that I did, which tie into what we did previously. By the end of the book, okay, so we've got the time one there. Scrooge has completely changed his ways and is now a happy, generous person who takes on the spirit of Christmas. Having opened up to the world. So a phrase here which describes his change, rather than saying Scrooge has changed. He realises that other people need his help, and so he not only raises Bob's salary, but also donates to the charity workers whom he previously rejected in Save One, saying a great money back payments are included in his donation. So I've tied together several things there to make that more sophisticated. The reason why that works is I am telling the story and I am embedding my quotes. Okay, which is other skills that we've looked at. As a result of his redemption, now being complete. So again, you've got a phrase which shows that we've moved on, cause and effect, but it's quite precise, the redemption being complete. He now becomes a second father to Tiny Tim, and Dickens wants, so again, I've used a sentence start here, but it's actually in the middle of the sentence. Dickens wants his readers to see that the problem of poverty can be solved by educating the rich, and that if society becomes less ignorant towards problems of poverty and greed, then the world will become a better place. All right, so just by having these little bits here, it helps to tie the structure of that content together, and everything which I have written there was on that right hand side. Okay, now you want to try doing your sort of next step to do after this video is try doing this again, but do it for a different stage. Do it for stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Do it for a different text. Do it for a Christmas Carol. Do it for the end of Blood Brothers. Do it for the end of Macbeth, when Macbeth has got his downfall. Okay, you can do it for any of them. All right, so if we just go back, academic writing style. It's not just about what you write, it's about how you write it, and that's really important. Thank you.